I didn't mean to follow her. That's the part that still messes with my head. I wasn't checking up on her, wasn't playing detective, wasn't one of those jealous boyfriends scrolling through locations and reading into every delayed reply. I was just driving home after a miserable meeting when I stopped at a red light and saw her standing outside a coffee shop 3 blocks away from her office. She wasn't supposed to be there. For a second I smiled because I thought I'd surprise her. I even reached for my phone, ready to text, "Turn around." Then a black sedan pulled up to the curb. She looked both ways. Not casually. Carefully. The passenger door opened before the car had fully stopped. She got inside. No hesitation. No wave. No looking back. The light turned green behind me, and someone leaned on their horn, but I barely noticed. My hands had locked around the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed that I just witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see. Until that moment, my life had been painfully ordinary. We'd been together for almost 4 years. We rented a small apartment with terrible plumbing and a balcony barely big enough for 2 chairs. We argued over groceries, laughed at terrible reality shows, and talked about buying a house someday. I trusted her completely. Maybe that's why I ignored everything that came before. Or maybe trust just makes you blind until reality forces your eyes open. I wish I could say that was the first strange thing I'd noticed, but it wasn't. Looking back, the signs had been piling up for months. I just kept finding excuses because believing them was easier than believing the alternative. She had started working late more often. Sometimes she'd come home exhausted but strangely cheerful, humming while she made tea. Other nights she barely spoke at all and disappeared into the shower with her phone. If it buzzed, she'd flip the screen over before I could accidentally see it. Whenever I asked how work was going, she'd shrug. Same old stuff. That wasn't like her. She used to tell me everything: office gossip, annoying clients, funny conversations with coworkers. Suddenly every day sounded exactly the same. Still, I trusted her. The next evening, I casually asked if she'd been near that coffee shop. She frowned without missing a beat. No. Why? I thought I saw someone who looked like you. She laughed. Definitely wasn't me. Then she kissed my cheek, smiled, and went back to making dinner. That should have reassured me. Instead, it was the first lie I could actually prove. I tried convincing myself I was overreacting. People make mistakes. Maybe I had seen someone who only looked like her. Maybe I wanted there to be a mystery because life had become too predictable. I repeated those thoughts so many times that they almost sounded reasonable. But once doubt settles in, everything starts looking different. A few days later, we were watching a movie when her phone lit up on the coffee table. She grabbed it so quickly that she nearly knocked over her drink. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just work." She answered without looking at me. 5 minutes later she said she was tired and went to bed, taking the phone with her. That had never been her habit. She used to leave it charging in the kitchen overnight. The next morning I noticed she'd changed the passcode. When I jokingly asked if she was hiding government secrets, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. People deserve a little privacy. She wasn't wrong. Still, something inside me whispered that privacy and secrecy weren't always the same thing. For almost 2 weeks, I said nothing. I smiled when I was supposed to smile, asked about her day, cooked dinner, and pretended everything felt normal. Inside, though, I was replaying that moment outside the coffee shop over and over. Then it happened again. I left work early because a client canceled at the last minute. As I drove past the same block, I spotted the black sedan parked across the street. My stomach tightened before I even saw her. She walked out of the building a minute later. The same man was behind the wheel. She leaned through the open window, laughing at something he said. Then she got into the passenger seat, and they drove away together. This time there was no chance I'd mistaken someone else for her. I followed them. Not because I wanted to catch her. Because I needed my own eyes to tell me the truth. They drove across town and stopped outside a quiet apartment complex I'd never been to. She got out, looked around once, and disappeared inside the building with him. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, unable to move. I don't remember driving home. I only remember staring at our apartment door, wondering how someone could live two completely different lives without slipping up. When she came home that evening, she looked completely relaxed. She dropped her bag by the couch, complained about traffic, and asked if I wanted to order Thai food. I just watched her. She noticed. What? How was work? She sighed dramatically. Long meetings all day. Another lie. I wanted to scream that I'd watched her disappear into another man's apartment. Instead, I asked one question. Who's the guy with the black sedan? Everything changed. For less than a second, her face froze. It was tiny, so quick most people would have missed it. Then she frowned. What guy? The one you met today. I have no idea what you're talking about. You got into his car. She laughed, but it sounded forced. I think you've confused me with someone else. I stared at her. You looked me in the eye and said you've never even seen him. She crossed her arms. I've literally never heard of the man you're describing. That sentence echoed in my head long after she said it. Her denial should have ended the conversation, but instead it made everything worse. If she'd admitted the guy was a coworker or an old friend, maybe I would have believed her. Instead, she insisted he didn't exist. You seriously think I'm making this up? I asked. I think you're stressed, she replied quietly. Maybe you saw someone who looked like me. I followed you. The words hung between us. Her expression changed from confusion to anger. You followed me? I watched you get into his car. So now you're stalking me? Somehow, I had become the problem. She accused me of invading her privacy, of acting paranoid, of letting my imagination destroy our relationship. Every answer came back to my behavior instead of hers. By the end of the argument, I almost felt guilty. Almost. Then I remembered the apartment building. You spent an hour there, I said. She looked straight at me. I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. It was the calmness that hurt the most. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't stumbling over excuses. She was erasing reality as if I hadn't witnessed it myself. I stopped arguing after that night. Not because I believed her. Because I realized she was never going to tell me the truth voluntarily. For the next week, I paid attention to details I'd ignored before. She suddenly cared much more about her appearance before leaving for work. New perfume. Better clothes. She even bought expensive earrings after insisting for months that money was too tight for unnecessary purchases. One Saturday morning she said she was meeting her sister for lunch. An hour later, I called her sister to ask a harmless question about a family recipe. She sounded confused. Lunch? We haven't made plans. I thanked her and hung up before she could ask why. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the phone. That afternoon, I parked across the street from the coffee shop where I'd first seen the black sedan. I waited. 40 minutes later, it arrived. She walked over like she'd done it 100 times. This time, before getting in, she leaned through the open window. He reached up, touched her face, and kissed her. There was no misunderstanding left. Only the awful silence that comes after certainty. I didn't confront them there. For a few seconds I actually thought about marching across the street and dragging every lie into the open, but my body refused to move. I just sat behind the wheel, staring through the windshield while they drove away together. When I finally got home, the apartment felt unfamiliar. Her shoes were by the door. Her sweater was hanging over the back of the couch. Every little thing suddenly looked like evidence instead of comfort. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. All I could hear was her voice saying, "I've literally never heard of him." That evening she walked in carrying takeout, smiling like nothing had happened. I brought your favorite, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. I know you're having an affair. The smile disappeared. What? I saw him kiss you. For the first time since this started, she didn't answer immediately. She just stared at the floor. Then the tears came. Not loud sobbing. Just silent tears running down her face while she whispered, "It's not as simple as you think." I hated that sentence the moment I heard it. It's not as simple as you think. People only say that when they're about to explain why they believe their betrayal deserves context. I asked her one question. Who is he? She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater and sat down without looking at me. His name is Daniel. So you have heard of him? She closed her eyes. Yes. The admission hit harder than I expected. After weeks of denying his existence, she gave him a name in less than 10 seconds. How long? She hesitated. A few months. I laughed, but there wasn't anything funny about it. A few months? While we've been planning vacations? Looking at houses? Talking about getting engaged? She nodded without speaking. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. I didn't mean for it to happen. I asked if she loved him. She covered her face with both hands. I don't know. Somehow, those 3 words hurt more than if she'd simply said yes. It meant she had been giving pieces of herself to someone else while still expecting me to stay exactly where I'd always been. Once the truth started coming out, it arrived in pieces. She told me Daniel wasn't a stranger she'd met recently. They had known each other years before we ever started dating. According to her, they had briefly been together, drifted apart, and completely lost contact. Then, 6 months earlier, they had run into each other by accident. It just happened, she said quietly. I shook my head. No. Running into someone happens. Lying every day afterward is a choice. She started crying again, insisting she never intended for things to go this far. She claimed they only met for coffee at first, catching up on old memories. Then the meetings became regular. Eventually they turned into something she couldn't explain. I asked why she never told me. Because I knew how it looked. Because you knew it was wrong. She didn't argue. Instead, she admitted the apartment belonged to him. Every late meeting. Every fake lunch. Every made-up excuse. They had all led there. The hardest part wasn't discovering she'd been with someone else. It was realizing how effortlessly she'd built an entire second life while coming home every night to me. The next morning, neither of us went to work. We sat in complete silence for almost an hour, 2 people sharing the same apartment but living in completely different realities. Every now and then she'd start to say something, then stop before the words came out. Finally, she whispered, I don't want to lose you. I looked around the room we'd built together. The framed vacation photos, the bookshelf we'd assembled on a rainy weekend, the coffee mugs we'd collected from different trips. None of it felt like ours anymore. You already did, I said. She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. That seemed to break something inside her. She started apologizing over and over, promising to end things with Daniel immediately. She swore it had never been about replacing me, that she'd been confused and terrified of making the wrong choice. I asked the question I'd been avoiding. If I hadn't seen you getting into his car, would you have ever told me? She didn't answer. She just cried harder. Silence can be crueler than any confession. Her lack of an answer told me everything I needed to know. Over the next few days, our families became involved, even though I never wanted them to. She told her parents we were going through a rough patch. I told my brother the truth because I couldn't carry it by myself anymore. Before long, everyone had an opinion. Her mother begged me not to throw away 4 years over one terrible mistake. My brother thought I should pack my things and disappear without another conversation. Friends kept saying I needed time before making a decision, as if time alone could erase what I'd seen. The pressure made everything worse. People weren't living inside my head. They didn't hear her saying she'd never heard of Daniel while I was literally watching her climb into his car. They didn't understand that the affair hurt, but the lies had destroyed something much deeper. Trust isn't only about sex. It's about believing the person beside you when they look you in the eye. Every night she slept in the guest room. Every morning we passed each other in the kitchen like strangers renting the same apartment. The silence became heavier than the arguments ever were. About 2 weeks later, she asked if we could go for a walk. It was the same park where we'd spent entire Sundays talking about the future, joking about what our kids might look like someday. Walking there again felt almost cruel. She told me she'd cut all contact with Daniel. I blocked his number. I told him it's over. I believed she probably had. The strange thing was, it didn't change anything. She kept asking what she could do to fix us. Therapy. A fresh start. Moving to another city. She was willing to try anything except accept that some damage can't be repaired by effort alone. I love you, she said. I looked at her for a long time before answering. I don't doubt that. She seemed surprised. I doubt that you love me enough to stop before you crossed every line. She started crying again. I was selfish. Yes. I was scared. I know. I never wanted to hurt you. I nodded. I believe that too. Intentions suddenly felt meaningless. The outcome was the same. Every memory we'd built together now had another memory standing beside it, quietly poisoning everything I used to cherish. A month after everything came out, I moved into a small rented apartment across town. It was clean, quiet, and completely empty except for a mattress, a folding table, and a few boxes I still hadn't unpacked. The silence there was different. At first, it felt unbearable. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to tell her something funny that happened at work, only to remember we weren't a couple anymore. She kept texting. Some messages were apologies. Some were memories. Some simply said, "Please answer." I read every one of them. I replied to almost none. Friends assumed leaving would make me feel free, but that isn't how it worked. I wasn't constantly angry anymore, yet I wasn't at peace either. It felt like someone had quietly removed the future I'd spent years imagining and replaced it with blank space. I heard through mutual friends that Daniel was out of her life for good. Strangely, that brought no satisfaction. He had never been the biggest problem. The lies were. Even if he disappeared forever, I could never unsee her climbing into that black sedan while believing I'd never find out. It's been almost 2 years now, and I still think about that traffic light sometimes. If it had turned green 30 seconds earlier, I never would have seen her outside that coffee shop. I probably would have gone home, kissed her hello, and believed every word she told me. We might even be married by now. That thought scares me more than anything. People ask whether I regret finding out. I don't. I regret who I had to become to accept the truth. I regret learning that love doesn't always protect you from deception. I regret how easily trust can disappear after one undeniable moment. I'm dating someone new now, but I'm slower to believe, slower to make plans, slower to hand someone the parts of me that used to come naturally. I don't like that version of myself, yet I understand where he came from. Sometimes I still hear her voice saying she'd never heard of him. Then I remember watching her get into that black sedan with my own eyes. Whenever my instincts and someone's words disagree, I no longer ignore what I see. I learned that lesson the hardest way possible.